Ilhan Omar's statements on Trump's executive orders. On dismantling federal agencies, Ilhan Omar has sharply criticized President Donald Trump's use of executive orders to dismantle federal agencies such as USAID and the Department of Education. She argues that Trump resorted to executive actions because he lacked support from Congress, including among Republicans, to pass these measures through the legislative process. Omar stated the president doesn't have the support among Republicans in Congress, and described these actions as an attempt to bypass the democratic process and checks and balances. On the Department of Education, after Trump signed an executive order to close the Department of Education and shift authority to the states, Omar warned that this could lead to a return of segregation in schools. She emphasized that such a significant change should not be made without congressional approval, stating he knows he doesn't have the votes for that, because this country does not want that to come back. So he's doing an executive order to sort of say, promise made, promise kept, on constitutional crisis and checks and balances. Omar has described the situation as a constitutional crisis, asserting that the executive branch under Trump was not honoring Congress' constitutional role in creating and maintaining federal agencies. She stressed that the courts have become the main line of defense, noting that every single executive order that has been challenged in the courts was found to be illegal. Omar argued that while the judiciary is functioning as a check, the executive's behavior and congressional leadership's inaction are failing the American people. On the refugee ban, Omar also condemned Trump's executive order halting all refugee movement and suspending the U.S. refugee admissions program, calling it inhumane and immoral. She warned that the decision would have devastating consequences globally and undermines American values, especially at a time of increased forced migration due to global crises. Impact of Ilhan Omar's criticism of Trump on her relationships with other lawmakers. Heightened partisan tensions and backlash. Ilhan Omar's outspoken criticism of Donald Trump has significantly affected her relationships with other lawmakers, intensifying partisan divides and making her a focal point of controversy in Congress. Republican lawmakers, Omar's criticism of Trump and her comments on U.S. policy, particularly regarding Israel, have made her a lightning rod for Republican criticism. GOP lawmakers have repeatedly called for her removal from key committees, citing what they describe as anti-Semitic remarks. Some, including President Trump and Vice President Pence, have publicly demanded that she resign from Congress or at least be removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. This has led to heated exchanges in committee hearings and on social media, with Republicans frequently using Omar as an example in broader criticisms of the Democratic Party. Democratic lawmakers. While many Democrats have defended Omar against what they see as politically motivated attacks, her comments have also drawn criticism from within her own party. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders have rebuked Omar for her use of anti-Semitic tropes and prejudicial accusations, leading to calls for dialogue and learning. Some Democrats, including Jewish members like Representative Dean Phillips, have met with Omar to discuss the impact of her words and encourage greater sensitivity and understanding. Despite these tensions, there have also been efforts at reconciliation and education within the party. Broader congressional dynamics. Omar, as high-profile disputes with Trump and the resulting backlash have led to congressional resolutions condemning hate speech and have forced both parties to confront issues of racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. Her presence and activism have energized progressive allies, but have also made her a target for ethics investigations and public condemnation from both sides of the aisle. Ilhan Omar's response in Congress to Trump's Department of Education actions. Forceful critique in congressional hearings. During a House Education and the Workforce Committee hearing in April 2025, Representative Ilhan Omar sharply criticized President Trump's actions regarding the Department of Education. She described as utterly ridiculous the administration's moves to cut nearly half the department's staff, eliminate millions in funding, and attempt to close the department entirely. Omar argued that these actions would hollow out the Office of Civil Rights and undermine protections for students, especially those with disabilities. She further noted the administration's plan to transfer the student loan program to the Small Business Administration after firing a significant portion of its staff. Calling the plan disruptive and unlawful, Omar stated, "To claim our education system will be improved or even preserved after the actions of this administration is delusional at best, and lying to the American people at worst." She challenged her colleagues to demand transparency from the administration about how it would fulfill its legal obligations to students and educators under such drastic cuts. Concerns about segregation and congressional authority. Omar also spoke at a Minneapolis town hall following Trump's executive order aimed at closing the Department of Education and returning authority to the states. She warned that dismantling the department could lead to the return of school segregation, and stressed that such a fundamental change cannot be made without congressional approval. He knows he doesn't have the votes for that because this country does not want that to come back. So he's doing an executive order to sort of say, promise made, promise kept. Legal and constitutional objections. Omar has repeatedly argued that the Trump administration's attempts to restructure or eliminate federal agencies like the Department of Education are being done without proper congressional support, calling these efforts illegal and a constitutional crisis. She maintains that the administration is bypassing the legislative process because it lacks sufficient support, even among Republicans, to pass such measures through Congress. Ilhan Omar has specifically criticized several Trump administration policies related to the Department of Education, highlighting their negative impact and questioning their legality and effectiveness. Executive order to close the Department of Education. Omar strongly opposed Trump's executive order aimed at dismantling the Department of Education and transferring authority over education back to the states. She warned this move could lead to the return of school segregation and emphasized that such a fundamental change requires congressional approval, which Trump lacks. She described the executive order as a way for Trump to claim promise made, promise kept, despite lacking legislative support. Cuts to Department of Education staff and funding. Omar condemned the administration for gutting nearly half of the department's staff and eliminating millions in funding. She called it utterly ridiculous to expect the department to continue fulfilling its legal obligations, such as protecting students from discrimination and providing guidance on disability rights. After firing large portions of critical teams like the Office of Civil Rights and the legal team, moving student loan operations to the Small Business Administration, Omar criticized the plan to transfer the student loan program to the SBA, which was already understaffed after firing 43% of its employees. She called this move unlawful and disruptive, arguing it would impair the statutory requirements of the student loan program, undermining civil rights protections. She highlighted that hollowing out the Office of Civil Rights would weaken enforcement of protections for students against discrimination, including those with disabilities. Overall, Omar's criticism centers on the Trump administration's dismantling of federal education infrastructure through staff cuts, funding eliminations, and illegal executive actions that bypass Congress, which she argues will harm educational equity and legal protections for students.